All right, I'm recording. Tanvir, are you there?
I am. How are you? I'm driving, so I'll keep my video
You're
off.
driving. Okay, good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm here with Jazzy from the Pulitzer Center. I also see someone named Angela's here.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hi, Angela. Who are you? Where are you from?
I'm in Peekskill. I take your communication 101.
Oh, terrific. Who's teaching that? Is it mine?
You.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
mine. Oh, mine. Oh, you literally
Yeah,
meant
it
mine.
is.
Okay, great. Well, glad to see
Yeah.
you. Well, I'm not seeing you, but I'm
Well,
hearing
yeah,
you.
let me
That's great.
try. Wait, one moment. Oh,
Well, hi,
there we go.
Angela.
Here we go.
Nice to meet you in person.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us
Thank you.
today.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
So of course, we're recording this and we're going to share it with students later. I don't know how many more students are going to come, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. We're here with Jazzy Gray from the Pulitzer Center, and she's going to give us a little presentation. And if we have questions at the end, anything else that we want to add, that's what we'll do. And then, like I said, I'll make this available for people to watch in the interim before the deadline. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jazzy.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and then we can, I have to remember to share sound.
Is it? Did I set it up right? You should be able to. Okay, great.
So I'm trying to figure out, here we go. Maybe, usually there's an option to optimize for my video clip, but it's not doing that, but it should be fine, I think. So this is my screen. You guys see it?
I do.
Yep.
Perfect.
Great.
Do a little slideshow. And so welcome to the 2024 Pulitzer Center Reporting Fellowship, which I know is named for Carol Smith here at Westchester. But I'm just going to go through a short presentation. There'll be a video, and then at the end, there should be time for questions. So Angela, if you want to hold those questions until the end, that would be great. And I think that'll make it easier for the recording too. So I'm just going to start by first, just talking a little bit about what the Pulitzer Center is. This is how we always start, by just talking about the mission of the Pulitzer Center, which is to champion the power of stories and to make complex issues relevant and to inspire action. So the Pulitzer Center is so much more than just this reporting fellowship program. We also have grantees and professional journalists from all around the world. We have a rainforest network, we have teacher fellows. It's really centered on both journalism and education. So that is what we do, but you are specifically here to talk about our reporting fellowship. So that's what I work on, along with my colleagues, Kem and Libby. And so what is the reporting fellowship? This is just the gist. You'll tell an underreported story and gain valuable journalism experience. And to do that, you will receive a $3,000 stipend, which you can use to cover those reporting costs like traveling and staying and food and things like that. And then we hope that after you are done, you'll join this Pulitzer Center network, which includes those professional journalist grantees that I was talking about, as well as reporting fellow alums. And then you can also use use some of those opportunities, and we hope that you'll stay in touch and broaden the impact of your reporting with some different outreach opportunities. So I know this past summer, we actually had our 2022 Westchester Fellow, Dylan, come back, and we invited him to Washington, and he came and spoke at a in-person event about his project on food insecurity. And so that's just an example of some of those outreach opportunities that we have. Okay, so once again, this is just our personal kind of mission statement. We hope that you'll use this fellowship and kind of feel empowered to impact the world and create change and engage diverse audiences. So you don't have to be a journalism student to, participate in this fellowship. We have lots of fellows each year from over 40 different campus consortium partners, and we have students from public health schools. We have students that are law students. We have obviously some journalism students, but we have people from all over. And so this is just what we hope all of those different experiences can kind of contribute to our program. So here on the screen, we have our 5 main focus areas. I will say about this, don't let this intimidate you. I know sometimes I think people get a little bit nervous when they're thinking about the story that they want to do and they're not sure, is it global health? Is it information and AI? What kind of bucket does it fall into? there's lots of different buckets that a lot of different things fall under. And so these are just the 5 main areas, but you can see we do have some subheads listed, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, if you're talking about climate and environment, you don't have to report necessarily on just the rainforest. Like there are other things that can fall under this. And sometimes we also have stories that fall into multiple different categories. So I would actually say maybe Jesus, our fellow from 2023, you know, he was reporting on, yes, health, I would say, but also probably some human rights as well. And so it can fall into some like multiple buckets at a time too. And I would not let that make you nervous or anything like that. So here are our 2023 reporting fellows. I'm trying to see if I can find Jesus on here. Oh, here he is.
There he is.
There he is. So these are all of our wonderful reporting fellows. This past year we had, I want to say 40, 45, I don't know, somewhere in the 40s from over 40 different schools all around the world. And so these are their lovely faces. And then this is a map showing the different reporting locations that they traveled to. So you can see we have fellows who stay in the US and report more locally. We also have fellows that travel almost to every continent you can see here. And there are lots of different options. The only thing I will emphasize when talking about this is that we do care very much about your safety. And so, you know, sometimes we get fellows from, or proposals from potential fellows that are interested in traveling to conflict zones or war zones, and that's just not something that we support generally. So that is just something to be aware of, and a really easy way to check if the location you're thinking about traveling to is, you know, safe, if it's going to fly. You can just look at the US State Department website and find their travel advisories. That's what we look at to determine, you know, safety precautions and things like that. And generally, I would say anything that's, you know, a 3 and above, if you haven't been there, it's probably not really something that we're thinking about. But I would definitely say for sure, like a 4 is just a no.
How high I'm just totally curious and nosy. How high does it go?
You know, I was thinking that just now, and I want to say it might actually stop it 4. It might be 4 or 5, but
Maybe
I don't
4
know
or
off the
5.
top of my head. Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah. I mean, I know I was just thinking about that while I was
Let's say 5.
saying
Let's
that.
say 5. We'll just say 5.
Okay,
Let's say
cool. So this is our reporting fellow community. You can see we have all these different opportunities. I talked about how we hope that you'll join our network, and this is just some photos from that. Here's Jesus up here. Yep, from Washington Weekend this past year. So every year, our fellows are invited to come join us in Washington, D.C., and they can get to know one another and present on their projects as well. And so that's what this photo is from. You can see Jesus with some other fellows. And then this is our big photo from that event last year. We also have some photos from a webinar. This is from a conference that we invited some fellows to speak at. So just a way that you can stay in touch and stay connected to us. So speaking of Washington Weekend 2023, I do have a short video that I'm going to play for you that just kind of recaps the experience. Let me know if you have trouble seeing or hearing it.
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to networking with these people based off of the strength of their storytelling. I'm excited to hear more about their lives.
This is a really great opportunity to travel, try something new, to get the experience of taking on a grant and running with it and learning how to plan, learning how to execute a story that requires travel and where, you know, you're going to be on a fixed deadline.
I wanted to investigate what happens in the in-between space when a culture stays alive, despite everything, to see all the changes of this modern world.
There's calls for Western science and indigenous knowledge to be incorporated more broadly on a national scale, but this community has been doing it for a really long time.
You know, people who are just starting their careers after graduating, or people who are still in university, to explore interest in international reporting, which is not something that people get to do a lot.
It's really wonderful to have everyone together here in DC to celebrate our 2023 Reporting Fellows.
Knowing that it is important to tell stories that mean something, you show why you care and why we should as well.
But I have come to believe that the same empathy that made me vulnerable has helped steel me. I've come to believe that that empathy has provided me purpose.
Many of the people that you will interview, that we interview, they're regular people. They're not experienced with the media, so it's so important to explain your process.
Gentrification and displacement, it assumes many different forms just depending on the history of the city, the people that are there, but it universally subjects housing and neighborhoods to commodification.
But because with the slight difference in events and roulette wheel of possibilities, we could have been raised in a different pair of shoes, looking through a different lens.
I would say, like, for students to really draw on their own experiences and their own backgrounds pretty pridefully. I think that filters a lot of your reporting very strongly and leads you to do a lot of impactful stories that I've seen so far today.
A really important part of the weekend for me was being able to talk about something I really am excited about, and you can feel that passion in all the other reporting fellows too.
I have kind of made it my mission to tell Zimbabwean stories from a decolonized lens, and that may sound elusive, but to me that just means telling our stories in a way that accurately and best represents us.
During my reporting, I explored the complex relationship artists have with artificial intelligence to hopefully produce a story of hope, companionship, and innovation amidst a time of grave uncertainty.
The Pulitzer Center aligned me with such wonderful mentors like Kem and Peter Canellos. As a student journalist, it can be overwhelming to be reporting abroad, so having a mentor who really cared about my project and cared about me so much was just so instrumental.
My experience at Washington Weekend has actually been pretty incredible. We can have community together and support each other. People who understand you and understand the work you do, I think, is really hard to find. And I'm really grateful for the space to build not just professional network, but also some friendships that I think are going to be lasting.
That's nice. I always love watching that. I watch it a lot, but I still like it, so.
It was
Okay.
nice to see so much Jesus in there. He was in
I
there.
know. Okay, let me see. Okay, maybe I'm not gonna be doing full screen again. That's okay. Okay, so moving on to talk about just the timeline for this fellowship. You will have to complete the application by April 10th. So that's, a little over a month away. And the most important part of that application is going to be this 250-word proposal description. So with that description, you're just going to tell us, what your story is, why it matters right now, and maybe some other details if you have a plan for how you're going to report the story, why you're best suited to tell it, things like that. It's also a great opportunity for you to show off your writing skills. So like I said, we have a lot of students who aren't maybe coming from a journalism background. And so we do look at this proposal description and how it's written to kind of get a feel for that student's voice and how they write. We also have a budget. You'll look for clips, references, and you'll include a resume as well for that application. Then after April 10th, the Pulitzer Center and Westchester will work together to select a reporting fellow. And then after that fellow is selected, they'll be invited to a virtual program orientation and onboarding in early June. So afterwards, you'll be given a grantee advisor, and this is a professional journalist from our Pulitzer Center network who has either experience reporting in the region that you are going to be reporting in, or they have a lot of experience maybe reporting on the topic that you work with. So, we've seen a lot of these mentorships turn into really great partnerships, and just some really great things have come out of it. You saw Anusha talk about that during the Washington weekend video. And so that's my hope for everyone, I think. But then you'll also get to work with our team as well in the editing process, and also pitching, which we can talk about in just a few slides. And then the reporting process begins. So most fellows do travel in the summer. You don't have to, but that is just generally when a lot of our fellows have the most time, if school's off or anything like that. So these are the deliverables that you will be turning into us at the end of your project. So you'll have that main story that is, I don't want to say the most important part, but this can be, this is what your proposal description is about. So this can be your article, this can be a video, this can be a podcast. I know Jesus is creating a video for his main story. And so there are a lot of different ways you can fulfill that requirement, but this is, the meat of your reporting. Then you'll have a multimedia component. So you can do a photo series, you can do a short video, or I don't know, a podcast if it's short here too. Sometimes I think people get intimidated by this as well, but I wouldn't worry about it. You can just, if you aren't quite sure about doing a whole photo series or something like that, we do also accept just a few photos that can be included in this main story to fulfill that requirement. There are a lot of different ways you can do it, and so we're happy to talk to you about that. And then you'll also have this field note. This is something I think is very specific to this fellowship, and it's also my favorite thing to edit and to read, but it's a personal reflection on your reporting. So this can be about what you've learned about journalism, or maybe yourself while you were reporting. Sometimes people do, we've seen poems, I've seen interviews. It's kind of a fun, creative assignment, I think. It doesn't have to be, but it can be, and I think that's fun. And then you'll also have the opportunity to pitch deliverables to other news outlets. So your work does have a guaranteed home on the Pulitzer Center website, but you're welcome to pitch editors at other outlets. And you can also use those Pulitzer Center connections to do that if that's something you're interested in. And then obviously we'll help you. So speaking of pitching, this is just a few examples of the places that our fellows have been published before. You can see it varies quite a lot, from some more local publications to, national, or even some like international publications. So you can see there's a lot of different variety. We have lots of networks, and if that's something you're interested in, that's good. We can work on that. Okay, so before we get to questions, I am going to show you the Pulitzer Center website, because a lot of questions can be answered by just taking a look at this. So this is the Reporting Fellowships page, which you'll get to by going to pulitzercenter.org, opening this Grants and Fellowships tab, and then you can click on Campus Consortium Reporting Fellowships here. And then this just has a lot of information about, our 2023 fellows, some testimonials, and also our contact information you can access here. And then you can also look at our stories by reporting fellows here. So this is something I definitely recommend anyone who is thinking about applying takes a look at. Yeah, that's right. Takes a look at, because sometimes we get proposals from students who, want to cover a story that maybe we've already covered. And that always just makes my heart so sad, because it will be such a great proposal, but it'll just be something that, maybe one of our 2023 fellows already covered. And so that's, not something that we're going to do. So you can take a look here, just take a look at our stories that we've published. You can get a feel for what is a Pulitzer Center story, as well as, what we've already done. So maybe things you want to stay clear of. And then you can also take a look at our Westchester page right here. And then this will show you all of our fellows from the past. So you can see Jesus from 2023. He hasn't published quite yet, but we do have a draft it is in the works and it'll be coming soon. So you can look back probably within the next month. And I know he's also doing a screening, I think, at Westchester for his film as well. So stay tuned for more information about that. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. This is the Reporting Fellows email, but I'll put it in the chat too. So, but just for anyone who's watching the recording, this is the Reporting Fellows email. Libby and I answer it. We try to get back pretty fast, so you can always send us questions as well.
Great, Jazzy. I also put in the chat here, I put in some links and some information. I have an online application that people can fill out. It's on SurveyMonkey, or they can just email me directly or you directly, I'm assuming, and we can send them an application. One thing I wanted to share before we get to the question part is just this, hold on a second. It's such an important thing that we do for our students, and I wanted you to just get just a visual on the students who have done it from WCC before. So we have we've had 9 so far since we started in 2013. COVID threw a wrench in the works for a little bit, but these are the 9 people that have gotten fellowships from the Pulitzer Center in the past through us, and we've had a terrific relationship. And the things that they have, the things that they have published include a story about Belfast, a city divided, France tackling the Roma question, which is the colloquially known as gypsies, right? Lima, Peru, who owns the land? New Mexico, Native American health and nutrition. Brazil's learning curve and approach to treating autism. Dominican Republic, death of a patriarch. New Orleans tackling food insecurity. And then right now, the one Jesus is working on is about undocumented workers and insurance coverage. And it's such a wide, interesting, varied list or opportunity, or, a potential for people to cover, that I think that you should really open up your mind and think about what you're interested in, and maybe somewhere you've been before, have some experience, and really think about what would you like more people to know about? I think at the end of the day, that's one of the things they're looking for, is unreported stories of importance. And those can range from a small sort of scope story to large, because stories tend to overlap. A small story usually is a microcosm of a bigger story. So one of the things that students seem to really be curious about is what should I do, right? And it's something you can discuss with myself. You could discuss with your other instructors. You could reach out to the Pulitzer Center and just bounce ideas. And I'm happy to talk to you about your ideas. That's just what I wanted to share in terms of what we're doing here. Here we go. In terms of what people have done in the past. We've been joined by Christina and Jonas, and we have Angela here, of course, and then we have, I know I see Professor Evans and Professor Toy. Does anyone have any questions for Jazzy? Or myself, or anyone else? Angela, what were you thinking about? What's your idea? Do you have an idea in mind?
It kind of went everywhere between the healthcare and I guess the food scarcity situation, and more so where would I like to target that?
Jazzy, when you think about food insecurity, right, and I know that Dylan had done his piece, is that something that is sort of evergreen, that it's a story that it gets in? I mean, it's a huge story. It needs a lot of coverage. Is that something that the Pulitzer Center would consider again?
Yeah, definitely. I would, definitely suggest maybe not suggesting going to New Orleans to tackle food insecurity, but yeah, that's definitely an evergreen topic. We had a 2023 fellow. Yeah, we had Julia Manapella from Davidson last year, and she covered food insecurity in Florida. We had a fellow in 2020 who covered food insecurity in Michigan. And so there's definitely a lot of different angles and places you can talk about this issue, because it is so prevalent, I think. And you can definitely find a way to make that kind of general overarching topic your own.
Great. Did you anything else? Did you have another thought, Angela, about what you might want to do, or anything else?
I was thinking about maybe even leaving the country. So as far as maybe Jamaica, that's like where my background is from, and it's maybe like a different viewpoint. Whereas, a foreigner might come and view the situation. So it's a lot. It's percolating.
Great. That's exactly what you wanted. An idea that makes you percolate is typically a good one. right?
Yes.
And one of the great advantages of this program, and one of the great pluses, of course, is the international travel aspect. I know during COVID, the students were more apt or more likely to do it in the United States. Is that still an option to do things in the United States, Jazzy?
Oh, for sure. We had, I want to say, like 4 or 5 fellows stay in the US this year. So I know we had someone in Wyoming, someone in Arkansas, someone in Alaska. Jesus is in New York. And so definitely there are ways to go where you want to, wherever your story is, definitely. And I also think it's, you mentioned that like your background is like Jamaican. And so I think that's also something that can be helpful sometimes, is if you are choosing a place that you're familiar with or someplace that, you know, you have ties to and have a personal investment in, that is generally something that we value, you know, if we see that reflected in your application, because we do try to avoid this thing called parachute journalism, you know, where someone is like, oh, this is a really interesting story, you know, and I've always wanted to travel to France. And so they just pop into these communities who often need, you know, attention, who are often vulnerable, and then they leave and never go back. And it's just like a little vacation. So that's something that we do generally try to avoid, and why we look for that kind of tie, which I think is a really good point that you brought up.
Yeah, I also think having ties somewhere is going to help just your entry, your sort of your feeling comfortable, feeling safe, having maybe even some extra support around you. Always a good idea when you're especially when you're you know, perhaps a beginning reporter. Jonas, I see your hands up.
Hi, thank you. I'm also joined by Kira and Jonathan here.
All right. Hi guys. They all work for the Viking News, our campus newspaper, Jazzy.
So I did have some questions about what if you could define what clips are. It was mentioned in the slides. I was just curious what those are.
Yeah, so those clips will be your writing samples that you can send to us. It's not always a writing sample, you know, if you're a video student, a documentary student, definitely you can send us, you know, photos or audio or things like that that you've seen before. But clips are, yeah, those clips, I'm guessing if you work for, you said the newspaper, you probably have some stories that you can, you know, save, and please make sure we can access them, you know, that there's not a paywall or something like that. But yeah, it sounds like you're already set on that. So that's what that'll be.
Thank you. And also, a question I had was on the application, we're asked if we're considering other distribution avenues, media outlets, apart from the Pulitzer Center. What, like, what does this mean? Like, what, like any like media outlets that we would consider, like pitching or publishing our articles? Is that what?
Yep, that's exactly right. Just any, you know, outlets where you think they'll be interested in your story or where you think it may fit. I would say this isn't something that, you know, is a make or break part of the application, so I wouldn't stress too much about it. But definitely, if you have some ideas, if you know, for example, are doing something like food insecurity, we can probably, the one that's coming to mind right now is Global Health Now, and that's just because it's, you know, based at Baltimore and one of our campus partners runs it. So that's usually something where, you know, someone pitches it, we're like, yes, we can help you with that. We can help you get a placement there, and that makes perfect sense, you know, and that means you really understand your story and also the publication. But you know, people put like The Guardian, or you know, you can put a local paper. You also don't really have to if you don't want to. It's, like I said, not a make or break part of the application.
I think one of the strengths of that, Jonas, would be that they want people to see your story. You know, they want people to see your work. And so if you had some ideas in that area, that they'd love to hear. I think that's kind of the push. Obviously, we'd find a home in Viking News, but maybe beyond that, like, you know, maybe we could interest, you know, a local paper to run it because one of their, you know, the community college students did it, so things like that, or the community college student did it. You know what I mean?
I understand. Thank
you.
Sure,
of course.
And I think my final question was, what distinguishes, I think, successful applicants from unsuccessful applicants in your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is a great question. So definitely the writing, showing that, you know, you can write. So like I said, that proposal description is a really great way to do that. You know, always start, I don't want to say always, but, you know, generally a lot of successful applications start with like an attention grabber or some kind of lead, you know. And then I would also say feasibility. So, you know, when we're reading these applications, we want to know like what your story is, why it matters, yeah, and why you. Those are like the three big things, definitely, but also just that you can do it. So generally, there's a few different ways that you can show this. It can be, you know, and just talk, like showing us that you have maybe contacts, right? If you have an idea for who you're going to talk to, that's a good way to do it. Also making sure the topic isn't too broad. So I'll use a recent example. We had I'll say this one, an application where someone was like, I'm going to cover women's healthcare in a country. And we're like, okay, but what about it? You know, you can't cover everything having to do with women's health within, you know, 2 weeks and with it like a 1,500 word story. It's not going to happen. So definitely making sure that your topic is doable and kind of narrow enough that you can do it. And also if you have any experience with a place. So Angela, you mentioned Jamaica. If you know, are applying to go report in a country like that, like saying that, yes, I have experience, I have ties to it, I know what I'm doing. Or, you know, there's other ways to demonstrate that as well. If you've reported on topics that are similar, or if you know, what am I saying? Or if you've taken classes that are relevant, that's always a really, really good thing for us to see.
I would say too, just from our end, WCC end, the ones that have always grabbed our attention the most are the ones that have a real vision. And I don't mean capital V vision. I mean someone who's just able to tell us what they want to do and how they're going to do it. They have a plan. That's a big one for us, I think, because we want this to succeed. We want you to do well, you know. And if you have an idea of what you want to do already that's clear and concise, then it gives the Pulitzer Center grantees and mentors so much more to work with because you're already on the road. Just, you know what I mean? So I think having a clear idea of what you want to do is really helpful too, as Jazzy already said. I see that Professor Evans' room over there has a hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Jonas, I helped Dylan Ortiz, who was the WCC student before Jesus, and his was about food insecurity in New Orleans. He'd never actually been to New Orleans, but he'd read quite a lot about food insecurity in New Orleans. He wanted to go there. And so then he reached out to these nonprofits who are working there to sort of find out if he had a connection, you know, if he could find a connection. So that once he actually wrote his application, he was able to say that he'd reached out to them and that he had already made it somewhat feasible to begin the project, you know. So even though he didn't have the connection originally, he created the connection in the process of doing the application.
Yeah, being proactive like that is a great sign. And plus it makes you feel better about your idea, right? Because you're the one at the end of the day who's going to do this. So you want to feel secure and safe and comfortable that you have someone to talk to and a story to actually report on. So I think that's a really good anecdote. Jesus was also in Professor Evans' class the other day and showed sort of his working cut of his documentary so far. And he was talking about how much he appreciated not only the Washington weekend, how much he really liked that and how great it was to connect with the other student journalists there, but the mentoring aspect was really invaluable for him. And he really talked about that quite glowingly. And I think that's I mean, the money's great, right? The stipend to go do the reporting, but the mentoring and the networking and the meeting other people is valuable. So that's the other part of this that's so important, I think, for someone who wants to distinguish themselves and have some great experience. Christina, see, Christina's joining us. Christina, do you have any questions or anything like that you want to ask Jazzy about the program?
I just have like 2 questions.
Sure.
The first one is like, minus the rough cut and the final draft, how long will it like the process take to everything to be completed for the project?
That's a good question. And I would say it's, up to you. We don't want it to take more than, a year, like from the time, like we don't want the 2025 fellow to have started by the time, you're wrapping yours up or reporting or anything like that. We understand things do happen sometimes, we're very flexible, but generally I would say within the year, that's the goal, by the time you're selected, a year until it's done. Yeah, and then I would say it's honestly up to you. Generally, from the time you'll turn in a draft, you have a month, I know, to kind of get that completed, but you'll work with our director, Cam, to kind of set those deadlines based on what you think is feasible and what, you want to do.
Do you have, I'm just curious, Christina, do you have any ideas about what you might want to pursue or what you're interested in?
Well, I was in Professor Evans' class last semester, and I created a podcast sharing my experience with like ICE and them taking away people, especially my family members. So I'm just thinking about like how maybe I could expand that to not just me but other people that probably dealt with like immigration and ICE types of scenarios.
Right. Just as Jazzy said, having some prior experience working on it in a class is definitely prior experience, something that has already sort of opened that door for you in at least in terms of a topic. And that would be a great thing to mention in your piece. And if you can share a link to that or something like that, that Jazzy and the rest of us could hear and look at, that would be terrific. Like host it on a site or, send it all in an email or something that we can hear it ourselves. I think that would help too.
Will I still be eligible still if I go to another school that's not Westchester Community College?
As long as you, forgive me, Jazzy, this is my understanding. If it's not right, please correct me. As long as you've attended Westchester Community College sometime during the school year, you're eligible.
Yep, that's right. I know Dylan, he's at Fordham now, so definitely you should still be good.
Yeah, so if you're here, Christina, or anyone, obviously, if you're a WCC student at any time during the 2024, the fall or spring, right? I mean, or summer, right?
Yeah.
Until it,
I mean, it's up to you. Yeah. Like up to the school. Yeah. What?
Yeah, anytime this school year, you'd be fine. Even if you've moved on, even if let's say in the fall you went somewhere else, that's totally fine. Or if you were only here last fall, that's fine. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts that they want to ask or share with? Does Kira or Jonathan have anything to say, or did you make Jonas do all the talking? They've even turned their camera off.
Sorry, I don't think I have any questions. Those were all from Jonas, but he asked good questions anyway. So what about you, John? Do you have anything?
So if we contact the resources, we could potentially interview saying, I would like to report on this, and then we don't get picked. Is that kind of like bad on, like, I don't know how I'm gonna word this, but
if you contact sources saying that you would like to report on it, would it look bad if you don't get picked and then don't publish something?
Yeah, like I would feel bad, but does that matter, or like?
Well, let me tell you how Dylan did it. He was pretty straightforward with his contacts. He said, look, I'm a student from Westchester Community College. I'm applying for this grant with the Pulitzer Center. I don't know if I'll get it, but if I do get it, would you be willing to work with me? So he was completely upfront with that. And I think that's the way to approach it.
That would be, that's my advice too, be transparent and open. Trust me, these people, if you're contacting someone who's into this work and this is what they're doing and this is their passion in some way, they're happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was just said. And then also think about like who you're contacting. I would say organizations, definitely it's good for them to have a plan, and when they have lots of people, like the Pulitzer Center, that would be a great example of something like contact us, right? We will set up a time and definitely agree to that. But maybe individuals, I wouldn't, private individuals that you just found on like social media or something, and you're like, wow, this would be a great source. You can list them, definitely. If you do see someone who's interesting and you have their social media handle or an email or something like that. But if they don't work for like an organization that you're interested in, but just a private person, I would maybe not contact them ahead of time.
That's really good advice. That's good. Yeah. Another source that you could always contact too, I find that might be helpful, is if let's say you're interested in doing food insecurity and you found a reporter somewhere that in Jamaica, let's say, I'm just making it up on the fly, who has written about it and has some contacts already and has already following this work, that might be a great person to reach out to ahead of time as well. They don't have to be directly related to the Pulitzer Center to talk to them, obviously. They might be able to give you some insight and some thoughts and some contacts that you could share and ruminate on for your application. I think might be an idea too.
It's also a really good idea. Journalists help journalists.
Mm-hmm.
I found like they want to help you, so definitely.
I have found that as well too. So I hope that always remains the case.
Yeah. Thank you.
So no, Jonathan, I wouldn't say it's bad form to reach out and say, hey, if this is something I really want to do, I hope I can. I think you're totally fine. Absolutely, especially with an organization or some sort of advocate who's already working on this or a reporter who's already working on this. I think you're fine. But I appreciate that's thoughtful of you to even consider that. Do you have any ideas, the three of you there in the Viking News office?
I have 2 ideas. One of them is all the way in Australia. I know the Great Barrier Reef is in danger, so I'm big into climate change, so I was looking to maybe do something like that. Or more locally, I think America doesn't really prioritize safety procedures for CPR, seizure training, the Narcan stuff just came out, like all this, the fentanyl stuff. So I was looking maybe to spread more awareness on things like that, make it more of a mandatory thing in all public schools.
Great. Any thoughts about that, Jazzy?
Yeah, I think those are both strong. This is reminding me of something else. I think, Jonas, maybe back to your question about what differentiates like a really strong application. And I'm not saying this because of your specific suggestion, so don't say that. Don't worry about that. But just something to be aware of when you are writing that proposal description. There's a difference between like a topic versus a story. And so back to my like women's healthcare example, that's a topic, but something that is like a story pointed, like try to find an angle or try to answer a question is my advice to you. Like think about what question you're going to answer with your story. And then in that same note, though, you want to try to avoid activism, right? Like that's another thing that I think sometimes we kind of get caught up on, is that we receive applications where someone is like, I am going to write about how or why. I'm trying to think of a recent example. Okay, well, I'll just, I'm going to write about why everyone needs better access to like voting booths. I was just reading a voting story, so that's what came to mind. But like, yes, that's good. And I mean, personally, we obviously support that. Everyone should. But you want to try to find like a different angle to that. So instead of telling us what the conclusion already is, tell us maybe, like a question that gets someone to that conclusion, if that makes sense.
I hope that's clear, because I know how you're talking about. That's something we talk about in our journalism courses, that people have great ideas, but they're kind of for books. Like I'm going to tackle mental health. Like that's great, but that's a book. That's not a story.
Exactly.
So what I always tell my students is that if you start off really narrow, even more narrow than you think you should be, it is so much easier to do this than to do this, right? So start narrow, start small, think of one question you want to tell us about. And something like the voting booths, instead of telling us they need more voting booths, tell us why they don't have enough voting booths.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I see Professor Evans again.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I feel like, you know, the documentary students, the film students who come at this, you know, it's a little tricky because in documentary, we learn about advocacy documentaries, and that's a fine form of documentary, but it's not really journalism. And so I think a lot of students who've done documentary, they think, you know, any kind of documentary would work for this, and it's not really the case. The case is that this has got to be a journalistic documentary, and we don't learn really about journalism in the documentary class. So it's a learning curve, and I think Jesus had to go on that learning curve quite a bit, you know. It wasn't necessarily the way that he was used to telling stories. So the film students tend to be really good at stories. They're just not necessarily good at understanding how to make those into journalistic stories. So they kind of come from a different, Eric, you're talking about your students coming from a very broad kind of topic-based perspective and having to be narrower. Well, the film students have to think, how is this story journalistic? How can I put it in a context that's some kind of reporting? So it's a different challenge depending on the kind of discipline that you're coming from.
And I don't think that any of us would want a student to get an idea to do something, to try to pitch something that you don't care about. That's not what anyone is saying. Of course, what they're saying is, of course, you may feel very passionate about this topic, but we're gonna encourage you to be objective and fair and accurate about it in a way that is more journalistic than, say, advocacy documentary. But if you have the interest and a passion for something, that's only, I think, going to make you better at what you're doing. But for journalism, you're going to want to make it, like I said, fair and accurate and objective as much as you can, I suppose. Does that sound right to you, Jazzy?
Yeah, definitely. And so I guess, like I said, I hope just the fact that I said that after you told us your stories doesn't make you feel like that was at you. But, you know, talking about like the Great Barrier Reef, that's great. So then maybe like the question is, what are some solutions that like ecologists are exploring or something like that? Something that's like pointed and specific, you know, that you can tell in 1,500 words or just explain in 1,500 words or something like that.
And you get like your EMT, like the stuff you're talking about in terms of Narcan and things like that. If you might want to focus it into what certain areas are doing now, right? To like profile what someone is doing as opposed to what they should do. That makes sense, Jonathan?
So it shouldn't be why should this change? It should be what's going on and what we can do, or like what are the questions I should ask?
Yes, I would say instead of maybe saying like, well, it is kind of why should this change, but you want like the reader to come to that conclusion themselves, you know, so tell them like, I'm trying to think, I don't know if Eric, if you have like an
example.
Like an example of the question.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that you want to think about is this is not an opinion piece or a commentary, or, you know, this is not about how Jonathan feels specifically. This is about telling a story about an underreported problem, systemic issue in the world somewhere. And if you tell it well and you tell it intelligently and thoughtfully, I'm going to feel the way that you want me to feel at the end of it, like, oh, we really need to do this. We really need to save the barrier reef, as opposed to sort of starting off, this is why we need to save the barrier reef, or that, you know, if we don't, we're going to be sorry, that kind of thing, which of course we will, but you want me to come to that rather than lead off with that. You want to say, here's the situation, and your goal is that I'm going to arrive at the conclusion, the emotional, psychological kind of conclusion, rather than sort of tell me how I'm going to feel. Take me there. Does that make sense? Does that feel right, Jazzy?
Yeah, I think so. I think
I'm trying to think of like a really specific example. And
right on the head. Yeah, I was just typing actually in the chat, but I think I'm just going to say it now because I didn't realize I was unmuted at first. But yeah, so like I'm trying to, I don't know. Do you have a story that you're leaning towards, like Great Barrier Reef versus the EMT one?
Jonathan, do you have a which one's your favorite? Which one do you feel closer to? or more interested in?
Just pick one. Which one?
The EMT one,
The
probably.
EMT one. Okay. So yeah, like your professor said, like maybe the question is, what's happening now in this one place? Or it's, what does this organization think needs to change, or something about like you're reporting on someone else and not your own feelings, right? So the idea is that like maybe if you're reporting on like what's happening now at this or in New York, right? Like what's happening now in New York, right? You want the reader will come to the conclusion that it's bad and it needs to change, right? From your reporting, if you're just telling just the facts, right? Or if you find an organization that's already like advocating for change, maybe that's another thing you could do is just say like why or what this person needs to, or thinks. I'm having a hard time with the words right now. It's the end of the day, but what maybe this organization is fighting for, right? Or why this organization thinks these things need to change or something like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like Dylan's piece about food insecurity and Jesus'
That's a
piece
great
he's working on
example.
about undocumented workers and insurance. It's not Jesus is not on screen telling us, because he's doing video, right? He's not on screen telling us what needs to happen. He's showing us people who are involved with both the legislation and people who are on the working end of it, people who have suffered because of this condition, and they're telling their stories, and he's giving them a platform. He sort of gets out of the way of the story. But he's also, shepherding the entire operation. So we arrive at a conclusion based on what he's shown us rather than what he's told us. Does that make sense?
We're also learning a lot along the way. That's all. I mean, in his piece, there's so much legislation, and it's kind of dry, and he has to find a way to try and make it interesting, and yet we learn what the problem is as we go along. So part of it is about information, about sharing information, and it's expository, isn't it? It's like an expository documentary.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're telling someone about this thing. You've done some research, you've talked to people. Now you're going to put it together and tell me about it, but you're not going to tell me how to feel about it necessarily. I'm going to arrive at that conclusion myself. And I think it can kind of be a fine moving line between what we're talking about, which is kind of hard, why it's hard to nail it down. But you're telling us about something, not telling us how to feel about something. And that's about as broad as I think I can get. And I think the evidence, the differences will be evident as you work on it, I think. And that's the other thing, is that you're not working in a vacuum. You've got, Pulitzer Center people, you've got myself, you've got whoever is in your circle to help you too. So you're never on your own. I think that's the most important thing. Jonas, I see, or someone in Jonas's room. Jonas has raised their hand.
Yeah, it's Jonas. But, so one of the, sorry, I have to bring this closer, but I was considering, like, for my idea, if I wrote an article, would it be acceptable to draw pattern, draw patterns between certain subjects that like I've noticed, and sort of see if my reporting supports like a correlation between these things and kind of like their consequences. I mean, I know it's kind of vague, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it is kind of vague. Can you be, can you be any more specific, or is it something that's just forming in your mind?
Well, I mean, some of my interests in reporting are like human rights related, particularly with LGBTQ issues, but also politically related as well. And I've just noticed a couple of patterns in like political rhetoric that has become much more common the past, I would say, decade, which I know is a long time. That wouldn't be the scope of my article, obviously. But I'm also noticing like how certain discussions around like gender, sexuality are sort of being used in a way to restrict, I think, academic freedom as well. I mean, I just read how the Kinsey Institute in Indiana is sort of in a conflict with Indiana University because of, the politicization of these issues. And I also know that something happened in New College, Florida, where the board has been replaced by a more conservative-minded group by the governor. And I'm only noticing these connections now because my sociology professor, who is on like a hiring committee at our college, is noticing a lot of professors coming from Florida looking for jobs here. And I'm curious, like I'm noticing all of these disparate things, and I'm wondering like if I could investigate that and sort of expand upon that, if that would be like a compelling article or not.
Jazzy, what do you think?
I was gonna say, yes, but I would suggest focusing on maybe like one of those things, because everything you just said, I think is too much to tackle with this like one project. But yes, so maybe the question is like, I don't know, like, or it's about teachers migrating and then how that impacts like academic freedom, or how that relates to, I'm trying to think of like the question right now. But yes, I think for you, like having a question that you're trying to answer will be the best thing. So what are you investigating about that? I know, like you said, these different patterns that you've noticed, but how are you going to find that out? Does that make sense? So maybe you want to do a story where you're talking to teachers who have migrated, or teachers that are thinking about moving, right? And so the question is, how are these laws impacting, like it's almost like a teacher migration or something like that. If something like that is happening, and that's something you're noticing, I think that's really interesting. And like that would be a story, I think, to me, if you're able to track down teachers who have moved to New York. It sounds like you have a professor who maybe knows some of the people like that, or an influx of teachers from Florida who are applying other places. If you can connect these things or find like one thing to focus in on, or else you mentioned like political rhetoric, you could probably do a story about how political rhetoric has changed and the impact it's maybe having like on LGBTQ communities. But I would like, you can't do both of those in one project. You know what I mean? Like pick one or the other. So I think that's why maybe like having one central question might be a good thing for you to think about. But
yeah, I'm thinking when I'm thinking about what you just talked about, Jonas, maybe the idea is to find a story about teachers migrating from Florida to other parts of the country and see who they talk to. I mean, it's okay to use other people's work as a jumping off point. It's like, oh, they talk to, let's say the ACLU has a special interest or is tracking this, or is anyone tracking this? Is there data for you to use or talk to whoever compiled it? Maybe there's a teachers union in Florida that'd be happy to talk to you. So I think part of it is, one of the things about journalism that is super important is that if you have this question and notice this, someone else has as well. And maybe someone else has already started working on it or has done some really good work on it that you could expound on and use as a foundation to find people to talk to for your own story. Because you'll have a different story about the same topic, but they might be able to show you like where they looked and who they talked to. That might be a good place to, like, I would just Google, Florida migration, LGBTQIA Florida or whatever, and see what happens, see what you find, right? That's what I would recommend. I think you've got a great seed. You just want to make it grow into a specific tree, right?
That's very helpful advice.
I hope so. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. I hope it is.
Yeah. No, like I can get a little bit too big picture often, but if I just focus on a simple question, like a focused question, that
if there's any consolation, that is the number one challenge for a journalism student, is to narrow your focus, because so often in life we're encouraged to think big. Thinking big is great, right? But for your own sanity, I want you to start out small. Otherwise, you'll just get overwhelmed before you know it. In my experience. It's just about 5 o'clock. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share or add? We've got some information in the chat. You can always reach out to myself or to Pulitzer Center, Jazzy, directly. I've tried to share this information with all our students anyway, and I know Professor Evans has been helping to promote it. So, the deadline is April 10th. This will be available for people to watch again. We're going to have a Meet the Pros event, meaning that the reporter who's associated with the Pulitzer Center will be coming to campus at some point and having a presentation. We're still trying to formalize that, but that will happen, knock on wood, before the deadline. That's my goal, obviously. So that would also be an opportunity to come out and sort of network with people and talk about this as well, and just see, hear what a working journalist has to say. They're always great presentations. Jazzy, is there anything else you'd like to add, or anything that you think that we should reiterate?
I don't think so, but you can email me at reportingfellows@pulitzercenter.org if you have any more questions.
Going once, going twice, going 3 times? Anybody? Thank you. Thank you.
Jasmine.
Yes, I can.
You.
Sure.
Make sure there's no typos.
There you go.
I think that's it.
Reporting Fellows at Pulitzer Center. And and also just go to the website and just look at what other people have done. That's a really great way to get a sense of what they're looking for, right? I find students have been able to do that in the past and feel like, and it also gives you a level of comfort, because you can do this. And that's the message I have for all our students who are interested in this. You can do this. I promise you can do this. If you're dedicated and interested, if you're professional, and interested and responsible, you're going to do great. You're going to have a lot of help and support. So you can do this, is my
Answer your emails, you're in good shape. That's fine.
For your what?
If you answer your emails, you're in good
that's right.
shape.
If you just answer your emails, it's a pretty low bar sometimes. You just answer your emails. Thanks, Jazzy. You're just terrific. Thank you for sharing this and telling us about all this great opportunity. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I wish I could go back in time and do it myself. I would just jump on this as a student. What a great opportunity. Anything else? Anybody else? Then we're going to give a round of applause to Jazzy. Thank you so much, Jazzy. And we'll talk again soon, and I'll have this posted. And if anybody wants anything, just email me, eric.luther@sunywcc.edu, and we'll get you whatever you need.
Great.
Thanks everybody so very much. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.